Hello everyone and welcome to this, my guided tour and in-depth course into the Healing Light Tarot. Now, as a lot of you all know, I've wanted to do this course for quite some time. The pandemic intervened, COVID intervened, and various issues, health issues within my family intervened. And I then got to a stage I thought, I don't quite know how I want to present this. And luckily for me, my wonderful partner, Ben, suggested that we do this together. So welcome to the YouTube Healing Light Tarot course, and I hope you enjoy the journey that myself and my partner Ben have taken discussing the cards. In this first installment, we'll be talking together about how the deck came about, the deck's history and the themes behind the deck. And then in subsequent episodes of this course, Ben and I are going to be giving you a guided tour through the deck, card by card. So thank you for being here with us, and I hope you enjoy this as we share the deck together.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Chris, the Healing Light.
Healing Light Tarot, yeah.
Both of us are very familiar with this because we both use it a lot. It's a wonderful deck that I've been introduced to. So, first of all, I want to ask you what inspired you to create this deck?
There's an interesting story behind that, because it started out in 2015 as a collaborative project that didn't work, and then I went my own way.
Yeah.
So what happened was, in 2015, I was running a full one-day in-depth tarot workshop with a dear friend of mine called Penny Phillips-Devaney.
Yeah.
And the workshop was actually called Sacred Tarot, which is a name that I've eventually adopted for my YouTube channel as well. And the workshop was just an absolute joy. You know, Penny is kind of one of my tarot goddesses. She's been reading with the tarot since 1972. Yeah. Her first deck was a genuine 18th century Marseille deck. I mean, a real genuine one that her husband bought from an antique dealer. So I mean, you can imagine, you know, that's how she learned. Yeah. And she's a real, she's also a Jungian therapist. Yeah. So she's incredibly insightful, and it was just a real joy doing an in-depth workshop with her. Yeah. But we talked about the possibility of collaborating on a tarot deck together, and Penny actually introduced me to the concept and the symbol of the mandala, which is something that features very, very heavily. Yes. Which we'll talk about. Yeah. And so I just said, you know, we talked about it, and she talked about her ideas, and I just said yes. Yeah. And it was like wading through mud for both of us. Yeah. It was just not the right time. And I think as well, I was not the right artist for her concept. Yeah. And we didn't fall out, quite the reverse. You know, we're still good friends. But in the end, we kind of realised it wasn't going to work, and I went my own way. Yeah. I'd started by hand drawing, or trying to hand draw these cards, and then just something inside me was saying, you need to be doing what's natural for you. Yeah. So I switched back to digital, which, I mean, all my previous published work had been done in Photoshop and had been done digitally. And within 2 days of going digital, I'd completed 5 cards.
Wow, that's amazing.
And then that's when you know that you're on the right track. So it was not our deck, it was not the deck that was planned, but what that process did was it kind of triggered the realization that there was still a deck inside me that was to be created. So that was how it started. Yeah. And it was actually a fairly quick deck to finish. It was done over a period of a couple of months.
Okay. Oh, this is quite quick then.
It was quite quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite quick.
That's wonderful.
Because I actually started work on my digital cards at the beginning of 2015. And ironically, by the July of the 2015, I was on the verge of signing a publishing deal on it. It was complete. Wow. And I just completed it when I pitched it to Lo Scarabeo. Yeah. So,
gosh, you know, when you've got a concept like that and it's working for you, when you just banging them out like that, which is wonderful.
Because even Penny said at the time, she said, I mean, obviously there was a disappointment that we'd not been able to create something together. But even she said, you know, this is not my deck. This is not the deck we set out to create, but even she said, you know, this is a deck you've got to do.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever enjoyed a project so much as that one.
Really?
It flowed, and
let's just say, because this isn't your first tarot deck, is it?
No.
You have created.
No.
How many others have you created?
Oh God.
Quite a few, folks.
Quite a few. I've got 1, 2, 3 in print: Quantum Tarot, the Sun Tarot, and the Healing Light Tarot.
Yeah.
Plus a couple of Lenormand decks. But I've actually created, and of course I've self-published through Gamecrafter my rather humorous take on the Marseille.
Yes.
Tarot Millénaire de Marseille.
And all these are on your website, aren't they?
They're all on my website, which obviously the links to that are there in the Sacred Tarot channel. So but I've probably created, I don't know, 8 or 9 decks.
Wow.
You know, quite a few of which are not published.
Yeah. So we've got a prolific creator on our hands a little bit.
Bit of an OCD creator.
It's all good. Don't be like.
But yeah, so it was. You're talking sort of January through to July of 2015 to create that deck. Yeah,
that's wonderful.
So,
and you know, what were the concepts and themes?
Okay.
Behind this deck?
So, main theme. Primarily, you will actually see on the back design of the cards, which you can see there.
Yeah.
And you can see this symbol. This is a symbol that Penny introduced me to. And this is why, even though this was not our collaborative deck, I still owe her such a debt with this.
Yeah.
Because she introduced me to the concept of the mandala.
Yeah.
So basically what we've got here, you can see 2 overlapping circles. And obviously they create an almond-shaped space where they overlap. Now that is the mandala, but the 2 circles or spheres represent opposites.
Okay.
So this represents a union of opposites.
Yeah.
But as a result, it's also a very powerful symbol of healing.
Yeah.
Because where opposites unite, you create this healing space. Hence, I've got like the light of the sun emerging from there.
I love that. And this is a theme, guys, that Chris uses this mandala throughout all the cards in the deck, don't you?
Every single card has this theme. I wanted to create a traditional tarot deck, but there is a theme. There's actually a couple of themes in here, but I wanted the deck to wear the themes lightly. I wanted it ultimately to be basically a traditional deck that if you're not interested in the themes, you can still use this deck. So the most powerful theme in the deck is the mandala. The second theme here is what I would refer to is the time between times, which is a sort of Celtic traditional term for dusk and dawn. So because the mandala represents healing, I also wanted to sort of do a tarot that's kind of set in the half light. None of these images are not, when you see them, you'll realize they're not sort of, they're all set in a very ethereal light and with false colour. But I wanted them to be neither day nor night. I wanted them to be dusk and dawn. And I've always been fascinated by that Celtic concept of liminal space between day and night, where their philosophy was that when you're halfway between the two, the veil between this world and the spiritual world was at its thinnest. So the dusk and dawn, the time between times as they called it, is actually a time for touching the divine, for spiritual insight, for divination.
And I love this because it just shows the amount of work that goes into the process of creating decks like this, doesn't it? So you can see that you've gone to a lot of effort. I
mean, it's something that we'll touch on, because I said to you, didn't I? Several other cards in this deck were actually drawn from abandoned projects. Now, I'd actually started work on 2 decks between finishing the Sun Tarot, which is published by Schiffer Books, and doing this. But I realise now the reason those decks didn't come to fruition was I didn't really have anything new to say. Whereas once I started this, because I really did, obviously sort of Penny having introduced me to this concept, and it was something that I felt passionately about, that's when the creativity becomes fire, because you think, I can say something new now, something that I couldn't say through my other decks.
This is what drew me into this deck, because I've never seen it done by anybody else before, so it was a very interesting concept to me.
Yeah.
And the mandorla is something that's quite important to you anyway, because if anybody knows Chris, he wears this all the time.
All the time. It never gets taken off. Now, this is again a tribute to Penny. Penny introduced me to this concept in 2014, but it resonated so strongly with me. Now, this I treasure because one of my recent projects, actually, which I started before COVID in 2019, I illustrated an oracle deck for a really dear friend called Ken Payne, and he'd basically, it was his concept I illustrated for him. Now, Ken had contacted me because he was using the Healing Light Tarot and actually specifically wanted me to illustrate in that style. And as a thank you gift, when we'd completed our oracle deck, he bought me this, and he got it from the Chalice Well gift shop in Glastonbury. And of course the lid of the Chalice Well actually is a wrought iron mandorla.
Oh wow.
So hence the silver mandorla. And it is, I treasure this. It's a symbol of Ken's friendship. It's a symbol of the work that I did with Ken, which I'm really proud of, but also it's just a symbol that is very close to my heart. So it stays with me 24 hours a day, because I realized that actually one of the reasons I love the deck so much is because this is something that just really resonates with me. You know, my own healing journey, you know, my own coming out journey, my journey to self-acceptance. It was all about sort of reconciliation of opposites and finding healing space, you know. So I mean, I think this kind of healing space means so much. It means healing, it means forgiveness, it means finding peace, so many things. So the symbol itself is, you know, and the Trek geek in me as well came out, because Ken had only just bought me this and Star Trek Picard came out, and then of course the actual, in the first series, this exact mandorla symbol plays a huge part in the storyline.
And as you can see, guys,
and you can kind of see the Trek up here.
Big Trek fan.
But of course then one of the main characters is actually wearing a virtually identical mandorla, so I'm thinking, I like this. You know?
It seems you, sir.
Thank you, sweetheart.
So we've talked about the mandorla, and that you've incorporated it onto a lot of the cards and what it means to you. So when was it that you actually started this deck? Now,
it was funny because Penny and I had kind of had several abortive attempts. So I'd been hand drawing cards, which I wasn't happy with, and then were just somehow not realising her concepts either. And I'd said to her, why don't I go digital? Because that's how I've done all of my other deck work, and it was just not going to fit with her concept, you know, which I can perfectly understand. But in the end, we kind of decided to put it on pause, and at that stage, I realised that actually there was just something that said I had to go on the computer and start making images. And ironically, what happened was, when Penny and I did the Sacred Tarot workshop in 2015, I designed a poster for the Sacred Tarot workshop, which had a glowing yellow mandorla basically rising over a tree, green background. And I could just see this as my world card in the, you know, in the new deck. And I went back to the poster, and within literally, I think it was about 50 minutes, I'd modified it into a world card, and I can show you. This basically was the first recognisable finished card from the Healing Light Tarot. So there it is. You can see the world. You've got the world dancer that you would see in a traditional Smith-Waite based, or actually any traditional tarot card. But I wanted her, I just had this vision of her perched on top of the world tree. And she was, because of course the world, you always see the world dancer within a mandorla anyway, a mandorla wreath. So I thought, let's put her within a mandorla of two suns, rising suns. And again, this kind of liminal time between times light. And I just knew it was not mine and Penny's deck, but I just knew I was onto something. I thought, that's it. And by the end of the day, I'd also completed 2 other cards from scratch.
So you knew you were onto something.
I knew I was onto something. I'd done the 8 of Wands,
Wow.
And I can't remember what the other one was, but I ended up with, by the end of the day, 3 cards, sent them to Penny, and she said, look, this is really not my deck, but it is your deck.
Yeah.
Why don't you just explore this and see where it's going? So that's what I did. But that did start out as the 2015 Sacred Tarot workshop held in London on a Saturday in I think it was in April, something like that.
It's so interesting you started with the World card, isn't it?
It felt quite prophetic.
Yeah.
Because it felt, I don't know, there was just a sense of that the project was complete and waiting to emerge.
Yeah.
And it also just felt so easy.
Yeah.
In a way that what Penny and I had been trying to achieve hadn't done. And it's funny because, again, with that deck, I think that deck will be birthed sometime, whether it's me or possibly another artist. Penny's deck will be born when its time is right, because she had all the concepts there, but I was not the artist for it.
Yeah.
But ironically, that process, that failed process, actually taught me that I still had a tarot deck in me. And it was, it felt really prophetic. It was the World card.
I love that, because tarot never lies, does it, as we know?
It's
fascinating. There's never any coincidences, I don't think, with tarot. And, for that to be your first one, that's very interesting.
Followed by the 8 of Wands, which kind of was prophetic of the fact that this deck would really surge forward. And quite frankly, the 8 of Wands was a cop-out, because I thought, right, I want to do another card, which is the quickest and easiest. And it's like I've learned through numerous tarot deck creations that, the 8 of Wands, Pamela Coleman Smith's genius was creating an image that was so simple but completely said it all.
Yeah.
So
and that is prophetic in itself, because you were quite quick.
It was very quick.
Process of making the deck, weren't you?
Because the deck went in 2 phases. I completed, I think it was about 25 or 26 cards. Took a break for about 3 weeks, and then just surged into the rest of it. And I'd started early on in the year. By the July of 2015, the deck was complete, and I actually had a hand printed copy in my hand.
Wow.
So I completed it at the beginning of the July, and I went down to Glastonbury and took my hand printed copy with me. And there's a story behind that as well, because that was at the time where I'd pitched it to Lo Scarabeo, and I'll tell you that bit when we come to it anyway. But so it was a less than a 7-month process to create the whole deck, probably.
And do you think that there's 78 cards, and it must have been something that you loved doing?
Oh, I've rarely enjoyed a project as much as this one. This is when I kind of look and think, oh my God, my job is not work. When you can love what you do this much, and really, I would get up of a morning and just want to get on the computer as quickly as possible, and it felt like a voyage of discovery.
And there's nothing better than doing a job that you love doing.
Oh, I know. I know. And I love my job.
You go, folks. Tarot deck creating it is.
Tarot deck creating, my God, what a privilege.
And I want to talk to you about the creative process. So how did you put the cards together? What was the process in putting the cards together?
I'm a failed tarot deck creator, because my ultimate ambition, I discovered tarot when I was 13 through watching the James Bond Live and Let Die film, and I fell utterly in love with Fergus Hall's Tarot of the Witches, which is, a masterpiece of surrealist oil painting, and I would love to be the person that creates that fine art hand painted deck. And I have always failed. And I was going out with a guy in the early 2000s who introduced me to Photoshop, and at the time I was chatting with Ciro Marchetti, who just completed his first deck, the Gilded Tarot, and both of these guys were saying to me, why don't you try working in Photoshop? And I did, and I just took to it like a duck to water. I wasn't creating anything like what I can create now.
And interestingly, just something that you taught yourself, didn't you?
I taught myself under supervision. My partner at the time, Mike, was a web designer who had Photoshop experience. Ciro Marchetti was just an absolute sweetheart at the time, because of course I was pinging in my images as I finished them and saying, any tips? And he was just really, really gracious. you know, and he'd come back and say, look, try this tool, try that.
Yeah.
You need to tidy that up,
yeah.
you know, and
it's trial and error. Isn't
trial
it?
and error.
Yeah.
But I kind of taught myself with wise guides,
Yeah.
and actually I taught myself through creating a tarot deck.
Yeah.
My first deck, which wasn't published, which is very clunky, it's very naive, and the Photoshop is pretty poor. But the best way to teach yourself any digital skill is to have a big project,
Yeah.
and mine was my first deck.
Yeah.
So that's how I taught myself. My style has evolved. I mean, let me just pick out a card that will give you an idea of. So actually, I'll pick out two cards. So, I mean, my earliest work was kind of photo collage.
Yeah.
You know, I would cut out, almost digitally cut and paste photographs, and I was a real cut and paste kid. I loved the idea of kind of recycling stuff.
Yeah.
Now, as that's gone on, I still use photographic source in some places, but I tend to, it's more illustrative now. You can see from these. I mean, here's my, which way round are we? Yeah, because we're mirrored, and
Yeah.
so on the right is my strength card, and then on the left is my high priestess card. So you can see with these, I've used a lot of outlines and silhouettes. I've started using, you know, I use some photographic source material, because you can see for the strength card, I used a source photo of a lion, which I then turns into something illustrative myself. But all of these cards are multi-layered. I love multi-layered. I love semi-transparency.
Yeah.
I love layers within layers.
And
because
talk to me about colour, because you love colour, don't you?
As
an artist.
I have very vivid colour tastes.
Yes.
Because I took you to see the Catholic Cathedral in Liverpool, didn't I? And then all of a sudden you kind of understood.
I did.
Because my grandmother used to take me to the Liverpool's Metropolitan Cathedral from when I was like 2.5 and 3, and it is this blaze of rainbow colour with, you know, the stained glass.
I mean, it's amazing.
It is an amazing building.
It does give you an appreciation of colour.
So I like lots of clashing colours, you know, lots of colours, you know, and you know, everything is kind of quite vivid. But I also like dark colours.
Yeah.
So hence with the dusk and dawn theme of this, it worked really well. But I worked with these. There is a system of false colour. I've kind of kept the colour palette limited in each card. So the High Priestess is all blues, blacks and whites. Oranges and yellows and blacks with a bit of green in the strength. But I've used a different colour scheme on every card. So when you spread the deck, it does kind of look like a, you know, quite you know, quite
colours.
It's a kind of riot of colour.
Yeah.
But I love working in silhouette. I'm inspired by there was an amazing children's illustrator called Jan Piankowski. I don't know whether you ever saw any of his stuff when you were growing up. He worked in silhouettes against marbled paper backgrounds, and he created these incredibly evocative illustrations through silhouette. And of course you can't see facial expression, you can't see anything, but it's all implied, and I love that idea for tarot.
Yes.
Because, you know, we see, I mean, some of the best decks, you know, you see the facial expressions on the characters, and that really tells you a lot. But what I wanted to do was create something where you were intuitively projecting the expression. The expression on these is within the imagination of the person who is reading them. So I love working within that limitation.
I love that.
But also I like, see with the High Priestess, I mean, you can see I've worked in outline. She isn't a black silhouette, but she's almost like a window, because I mean, her cutout contains a waterfall.
Yes.
So,
and this is at the side, isn't it?
Well, you can see the pillars are actually waterfalls.
Yeah.
But also she's a window onto another waterfall, because if I put that there, you can see the texture running through her body.
And this is interesting to me, because I've said this to you, is that every time I look at it, I see something different in the cards. And you know, it's not an easy thing to do, is it, that? No. But every time you do notice something different in the cards.
I love working in a very multi-layered way. And I mean, with the strength card, this is a good one, because you can see that, of course, the female atlases are in silhouette, but they're semi-transparent.
Yeah.
You know, the lightning comes through them. You know, everything that I wanted to do with this is I just want to create something that's quite surreal.
Yeah.
Not literal.
Yeah.
But something that speaks very symbolically, but at the same time is very ethereal. I wanted to sort of create a landscape of dreams, because for me, I work, I use the cards meditatively, and I use them for path working as well. So I like to create images that you can close your eyes, visualize, and then really step into a world that is actually more than the physical world that we live in. And I think particularly because of the mandala and time between times concepts behind these, it was very important for me to create this almost like sort of surreal spiritual world.
And that is what tarot is to a lot of us, is that it's stepping through.
Stepping through portals, and also again stepping through a healing portal. And that's kind of what they are. And you see, the High Priestess herself is a healing portal, because she's a window onto a waterfall, standing between two waterfalls. So when you step through her, you feel as if you're stepping into another realm again. And
I
then
love this concept.
You step behind the veil and you're into another realm. So there's just multiple realms layered in these. That's what I wanted to achieve.
As we go through in future videos, the cards, it's very interesting to see where the mandala is positioned, isn't it? Which I know we're going to go through.
What I've done on each card, I wanted the theme, the deck's themes, I wanted them to sort of, I wanted the deck to hold the theme loosely, but the guidebook, I talk about the fact that I've put a mandala in each card, but one of the things that I say in the guidebook is the mandala on each card is very specifically placed. Now, I don't talk about it in the book. I kind of want people to form their own conclusions, but you can see, where are we, on the High Priestess, the mandala spheres are at the bottom of the card, and the priestess is emerging from the healing space. So I wanted that to speak for itself. On the strength card, again, you've got these two female atlases holding up this sphere, which contains this fiery lion. But you see, they both have their each sphere, and they both have their own sphere, and it's actually the union of the two spheres that gives them the combined strength. What I actually did here is I wanted one to represent the conscious and one to represent the unconscious. So it's the unity of both. So there is a mandala on every card, bar two, which actually break the rule for a very, very specific reason, and then obviously we'll talk about those.
Which is very interesting, because you pointed this out to me and I was fascinated by it, and I'm looking forward to touching on those.
We'll touch on those. But each one contains a mandala, but the placing of the mandala, what I wanted to do is challenge people to look. It's significant, and I wanted people to look for where the healing energy of the card is, and where the healing emerges from, and that's kind of an important part of this for me.
And I want to talk, because you mentioned the guidebook, and the guidebook is something you wrote yourself. And so, where do your inspirations for the meanings come from?
For me, I think what happens is you end up, when you start a project like this, I wanted to create what is in effect a mainstream traditional tarot deck, but obviously, as an artist, you're bringing your own sensibility to it. Now, for me, the process is that I create the cards from my imagination. Obviously, the concepts develop as I experiment in Photoshop, and also from my original concepts in my imagination. I love working through limitations, and I still, even with 20 years worth of experience in Photoshop, I still have to make do and mend. Because I have a set of, like any artist, I have a set of limitations. I love working in Photoshop. I haven't even begun to plunge into I've only plunged into a fraction of its potential. So there's a lot of things that I can't do. But ironically, it's the things that you can't do that very often become your strengths, because you have to improvise around them. So many of these images, I've had to come to them and say, right, this is my understanding of, say, the Fool card, or the Strength card, or the Five of Wands. Within the limitations of my technique and my style, how can I express that?
To the wider audience.
So like with Strength, I can't recreate something like Pamela Coleman Smith, but I thought I can create something in silhouettes that will actually evoke how I see strength. So you're working with limitations, but then that very often triggers inspirations as well.
I like how you talk about the meanings, but you also let the reader make their own mind up.
Absolutely.
The reader make their own mind up about
absolutely
what they think it should be. So it's more a collaborative.
It is, because I mean the best tarot readings are collaborative, and also I mean, you know, of course I've given my meanings and inspirations in the guidebook, but I mean my advice to anyone is, right, read that.
Yeah.
But as you know, once your foundation in traditional tarot meanings and symbolism is established, just take the images and go with your own intuitions as well. You know, my meanings are valid, but actually what you will see things in the cards that I don't see.
Yeah. And it's about what the cards mean to people, isn't it? As well as...
And what they mean in any given moment is something that's really important too.
Yeah.
That actually... The best times I have with this deck is when I'm chatting to people online, and all of a sudden they come out and they just literally slap me between the eyes with some amazing insight into one of my pieces of artwork that I would not have seen in a million years. But then it's triggered their intuition and also if it's somebody who is more of a tarot adept than I am, and then of course their inspiration gets triggered. They have a deeper understanding than me, and then all of a sudden you think, oh my god, I couldn't have even seen that there in my own artwork, which is really exciting.
I find it very interesting that because people have said to you they've seen things in the cards that you didn't initially see.
Exactly.
But it's like on a subconscious level, it feels like we're all connected in some way, because they're seeing things that maybe you did subconsciously, but you didn't know you were doing it. And it's just very interesting, isn't it?
It is. And also it kind of reminds you that actually it's weird. This is my work.
Yeah.
I created this, but what it also reminds you is that once you've created it, and once it's got physical form and it goes out there, it takes on a life of its own. And it actually stops being yours on a level. It then becomes whatever it wants to be or needs, it becomes something different to every single person that picks it up and uses it. And that's the exciting bit, because that's when it takes on a life of its own. Which I give it a certain amount of life as the artist, but then the bulk of the life it then takes on is way beyond me. And
the fact that it's called the healing light, just kind of, what you've just said there, it goes into that, doesn't it? Because people are kind of using it as a healing light, because I do think tarot is a healer. To be able to see, things in the tarot that people struggle with in daily life, and
we think very similarly, don't we?
Yeah,
because
we do.
I don't primarily believe in prediction through tarot, and I think this is probably one of the reasons why we get on so well, because we kind of share the vision of tarot as a mirror, and a therapeutic and reflective mirror, and tarot as a healing tool that actually allows us to process, gain insight. And
we've actually used this deck together, haven't we?
Yeah.
And we both share what we think the meanings of the cards are, and then we work together in.
And it's powerful as a couple, isn't it? Because it's interesting for me working with you, because you pick up on things within these cards that I wouldn't, and vice versa. Which doubles the strength of the reading. But I've always seen tarot as a mirror. But it's interesting you said about the title. That was not the original title.
Oh, tell us about what the original title was.
That's the third title this deck.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. It started off as the Mandorla Tarot.
Okay.
Now, ironically, that was what Penny and I were going to call our deck. And she very graciously said, you can use that title. Because, I mean, the thing is, titles are not exclusive. I mean, we both love Cat Black's Golden Tarot, don't we?
Yeah.
But then Liz Dean has also done a Golden Tarot. And I kind of, that's the way I view it. Somebody else might do a Healing Light Tarot at some stage. But anyway, Penny very graciously said, stick with that. But ironically, I pitched it to Lo Scarabeo. They didn't like the title because they said, that's going to be too obscure. We can't. So I thought, fair enough. And then my editor, Rick, my lovely editor, turned around and he said, how would you feel about the Time Between Times Tarot? And I thought, yes. And it's funny because I told Penny, and there was a kind of relief. It's like, I've got my title back, which was fine too. So everyone was happy. And then I got this email, really apologetic email from Rick. And the funny thing is, here is one of my first two proof copies. I got this one printed on Make playing cards when I first finished the deck. There's another handmade copy that a dear friend called Billy, who was emigrating to New Zealand, I gifted to him. So this one had black borders on it. The other copy had white borders. So I'd had this printed. I'd hand printed another copy, and of course then the title changed to The Time Between Times Tarot. So I then did a couple of revisions and I printed myself another proof copy because because I thought if anyone's going to see this deck, they'll want to see it with the title. So of course this one with white border, I'd settled on white borders by this stage. And then I got this really apologetic email from Rick. It was so funny because he said, look, I really don't want to mess you around. He said, but I've just discovered that one of the other projects that we've commissioned has got a similar title.
Oh my goodness. Can
we change the name again? I think, oh God. So I said, yeah, whatever. I was nice to him, but I thought, because I really like that title. Yeah. And then he got back to me a day later and he said, we've had a chat with the commissioning team. He said, how would you feel about the Healing Light Tarot? And it was just such a relief because I thought, it's weird because all of a sudden you think, oh my God, that fits.
Yeah, especially what you've just said about the Mandora and the Healing Between. It couldn't have picked a better name, really.
It's one of the reasons I love working with Lo Scarabeo because I've always had a really good relationship with them in terms of the practical nuts and bolts of, because you don't always, you can name a project.
Yeah.
As the author, if you're going to be commissioned by a publisher,
yeah,
they're footing the cash. Therefore, it's down to them. They need to be certain that they can sell it.
Yeah.
And what I found is whenever anything to do with the practical nuts and bolts, the titling, the packaging, the presentation, I love working with them because they kind of just get me.
And let's talk about the packaging because most decks I've come across with Lo Scarabeo are normally in a tuck box, but this particular deck came in a lovely hard.
Now that wasn't the first, but where I was lucky was my first publication with Lo Scarabeo was the second edition of the Quantum Tarot, and where we were lucky is because they decided they wanted to do something different, so they trialed this packaging for the first time on the Quantum Tarot, and it was successful, and they adopted it as a standard format. So of course by the time the Healing Light Tarot came out, Rick just, my editor just said, look, we're going to go with the same packaging. Are you okay with that? It's like, hell yes.
Yeah. So you've been quite lucky with your decks, haven't you?
Oh, I'm just so lucky because I haven't had a single thing published in the top box. They've all had deluxe packaging.
What you wear around your neck, probably. It's giving you all the luck in the world, isn't it?
They've all. I've worked with where are we? 3 publishers. One that is no longer around because sadly they went bust. Now they actually, the first edition of the Quantum Tarot, they did like this, and US Games had done it with Cat Black's Golden Tarot for the first time, which it was beautiful. So Canati, my original publisher, decided they wanted to go with that for the first edition of the Quantum. Of course, Lo Scarabeo decided that they were going to stick with it and trial it for their own stuff. And then I've just been so lucky because every single one of my decks that's been published has had really good deluxe packaging. So this is what I got. But again, they did brilliantly in choosing the title for this. I would not. It's so obvious, but I wouldn't have thought of it. And I think in some ways it really sums the deck up better than any other title. But also, where I am lucky is they kind of just get, I don't know whether they realise it, but they get me as an artist. And I was always, right from the outset, a close friend of mine is a very successful multiply published author. By the time I got my first project into print, he had 19 books in print.
Wow.
And
that's a lot, isn't it?
He gave me a lot of advice over dealing with publishers, and he said, look, you will always be invited to give input, into and feedback with regards to packaging. He said, now they will invite you to give input. Now the reality is, in a lot of cases, your opinion counts for nothing. And the bottom line is they are footing the bill. Their salespeople have got to be confident that they can market it. Therefore, they will listen to what you've got to say, but ultimately they will have the final decision. So don't push it. Now, I'm not particularly precious. So whenever publishers have come to me and said, what do you want on the box? I will make suggestions and say, look, this, and this are my favourite images. But you go and do what you feel is best and what you feel that you can effectively market through your catalogue. But where I'm lucky with Lo Scarabeo is they just totally get me. And this was a prime example, because the images that they chose here, I would not have thought of that combination. But I remember when they sent me the PDF of the packaging design, and it was like, oh my God, that is perfect.
Yeah. And that's wonderful that they get you like that.
They totally get me. And I have a really good relationship with my editor.
Yeah.
And I could just, in the end, I mean, we did this with the Quantum, because, we just said to them, look, the moon card was on the front of the original edition.
Yeah.
So you might want to go with that, but just take your best guess.
Yeah.
And I basically said to them, look, I like this and this card,
Yeah.
but just take your best guess. I did the same with the Healing Light Lenormand. They took their best guess. I would not have chosen any of these, but actually they had better judgment than me. It works really well. And I love this box because I love what they did.
I love these boxes, and I have to say, as a collector of tarot,
it's durable, isn't it?
It is, and these are the best boxes because they're easy to. You're not fiddling too much with them, are you? Like you do.
You lift off the lid. You can just you can tip your cards out. The booklet's in there. And
it's compact, isn't it?
So I'm very lucky because I've never had a dud in terms of packaging. And luckily for me, whoever is in the design department that does my boxes, they kind of really do a good job.
They totally get you.
They get me, and they're good designers. So I am lucky. So
packaging is 10 out of 10 by the sound.
Packaging is 10 out of 10, and long may they continue. Yes.
So we talked a bit about the first card that you created.
Yeah.
What about the last card? What was the last card that you ended on?
The last card was the Five of Pentacles.
Well, so is this prophetic? I'm guessing it's not.
Funny if it wasn't, but it was. I've got a very, very specific.
Maybe it was the tiredness after the end of the
probably
that was prophetic.
But you know what it was more than anything else? I love visually. I love Pamela Coleman Smith's Five of Pentacles, and nobody ever comes near it.
Yeah.
It's a really difficult card to pull off, and yet out of her Pentacles suit, visually, it's one that really stands out. And
while you're talking about the five, I'm just going to see if we can have a look at the
have a look
just to show.
And what it was, I couldn't find a suitable stained glass window to use as reference.
Yeah.
Because obviously, I'm collaging in Photoshop in layers, and you've gone past it. Hang on, a little bit back.
There we go.
There you go. There it is. So what I couldn't find was a suitable stained glass window, and then I was Googling, and I found this amazing piece of medieval stained glass that I used as my template. And then, of course, what I did is I just put the Five Pentacles into the stained glass. And again, I would do it a little bit differently now, but it was one of those where I just looked. And the moment I finished that card, it was the one card, because it was the last one, you think, what's this going to look like? What's the last card going to look like? And when I finished this, it's a difficult card in terms of its meaning. But there was such a sense of joy when I finished that, because there was just this sense, oh my God, that my deck is now complete. Yeah. That is what my Five of Pentacles is going to look like.
And so, looking at the card, I love this where the mandala is here, the light shining down. Isn't
because the window shows light coming from a place of refuge, and that's why there was nowhere else I could have put that mandala. So that is a good example. It's just a light supplemental message on the card. The mandala shows where there is healing, where there's solace, where there's comfort. And actually, in this case, it's beyond that wall. It's inside, and they're outside. So that was the last card, and the world was my first card.
That's so interesting. That's fascinating. Okay, and what? Will you be revisiting the deck in the future at all? Will there be a 2.0 or?
In theory, no, because I'm still happy with it.
Yeah.
But it's funny, it's something I mentioned to you, wasn't it? When Ciro Marchetti completed the Gilded Tarot in 2004, and it blew everyone away because it was an absolute masterpiece in its day, and it completely changed the way people viewed tarot and how tarot art could be created. Now, I doubt Ciro Marchetti would have ever thought he would revisit the Gilded Tarot, and yet now he's revisited that, and we've got the Gilded Tarot Royale, which is, it takes all of the same themes and exactly the same iconography, but obviously he's revisited the artwork, and it is just so much richer. Now, if this ever goes out of print, if I was ever approached to do a new edition of it, or if it went out of print and then I decided at some stage I had something new to say, and I was going to put out a self-published edition, maybe I would. But actually, for the time being, I'm still really proud of this deck, and even though it'll be 8 years old this year, I'm still, thankfully, I can still look at the artwork and think, oh yeah, I'm happy with that. If I ever get to the stage where I'm not, or when it goes out of print, then maybe I will. I don't know whether I could say anything more.
So you're doing a James Bond and you say never say never again. Sounds good to me. It's fair enough.
Not for the time being, because I don't think at the moment I couldn't do any better. And also, luckily for me, it seems popular. It's still in print. It's stayed in print since 2017. It doesn't show any sign of going out of print because it's still a popular deck. And
well, I mean, I'm biased, but I don't think you need to make any changes, just because to me it's a wonderful.
It's still my baby. And it kind of is very much of all my decks. It is very much, actually. That was the first time I created a deck where I felt that my actual skills as a digital artist were enough to say exactly what I wanted to say. I don't say that I won't do better in the future, but I'm still so proud of this one, and I'm really happy with what I created. So
And last question: what do you envision the long-term impact of the deck will be?
Oh,
that's a hard question, I know.
I wanted to create something that would encourage people, even who'd worked with tarot for a long time, to see it in a different light. And for me, if I created this deck for any reason, it was actually to show people what a powerful healing tool the tarot can be. I think we both understand this, don't we, in our own personal experience. My experience of tarot is that tarot was the main tool that actually guided me through my self-acceptance process. It guided me through my coming out process. Working with tarot, they're very powerful human archetypes on every card, and they can reflect back to us what's going on in us, but they also show us, for me, the most important thing of the tarot is it shows us the potential of what we can be as human beings. And that was a very healing process for me. So in actually incorporating a healing theme in terms of the mandala into each of these cards, that's what I want this deck to do, is actually to show people what a powerful healing tool the tarot can be, and how transformational working with the tarot can be. So if it does that, it served its purpose. And even when it's gone out of print, when there's out of print copies lying around in junk shops, or you inherit a copy from your grandmother, then if it does that, it's done exactly what I want it to do. So that's what I hope it leaves behind.
Wow, that's wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you, Chris.
It's my pleasure, Donny.
Very interesting.
Next time we will actually be beginning a guided tour through the cards, won't we? Because
we're going through the whole card set.
Because ironically, when we got together, you had just bought the deck, hadn't you? And it kind of felt really great, because I'm thinking, my God, here we are. We've got together. We're now a couple, and I get this wonderful opportunity to actually give you a tour of the cards. But ironically, this particular course, I'd announced that I was going to be doing a specialist course on the Healing Light Tarot on YouTube a couple of years ago, and then the pandemic hit, various other situations, health issues within the family hit, and it never got filmed. But actually, when we got together, I thought, oh God, we can do this together, and we can talk through the cards and take a journey through together, can't we? So,
and that's so true, because we use this together since I've bought it, don't we? And we've had some really powerful readings with this.
Very much.
And I love this mandala theme. I think it's so, for me, it's a very unique thing that I've never seen anybody else do before. And it reminds me of you anyway, because of your chain. But I'm really looking forward to doing these videos with you, because I think it's a very interesting deck, and I think we're going to get a lot of,
I hope so,
insight from the videos we're going to do together.
So hopefully you've all enjoyed this, and you'll join us for the next one, because actually in the next instalment we're going to be doing part 1 of the major arcana, aren't we? So I will give you your own personal tour through the majors, and then hopefully share it with everyone that's watching. So I've just loved doing this with you.
Yeah, I've
so
enjoyed
it hopefully if you've been watching this, you will have enjoyed this too, and that you'll join us next time.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks.